Here at Drip Fed Dread, we all hail the mighty pumpkin. And October is the most wonderfully frightful time of the year. And one thing I love more than October and Halloween itself is the nostalgia and aesthetic of my childhood celebrating Halloween. Cinema is such a beautiful aspect in the world because it captures these films of a bygone time, and we get to look back and see all the aesthetics and vibes and ambiance of Halloween. The 90s did it with Hocus Pocus. Even the early 2000s had Trick or Treat, but there are so many movies that just capture the Halloween vibe and spirit. But there's one on this list today that I genuinely want to talk about because I feel like it's a deep cut. I think it's underrated, and I know if you love Halloween and the vibe of it just as much as me, you will absolutely adore this movie. And it is 1988's Lady in White. What up, y'all? Welcome back to Phantom of the Indie Review. I am your host, Baby Crocodile Dill. We are on the beloved journey of 4,000 subscribers by Halloween, and since this is the month of October, and we're talking about a movie that has the most Halloween drip of all time, you gotta subscribe if you love this type of content. If any of this sounds chill to you, and if you want to get locked in the closet and see a ghost of a little girl, then come hang out with me. The writer and director of this film, Frank LaLoggia, partly based the screenplay of the film on a legend regarding a woman who supposedly searches for her lost daughter in the Durand Eastman Park in Rochester, New York, which is the writer and director's hometown. So there's some deep-seated roots to this film. You could tell behind the camera he really cared about this project a lot, and that's what I love about certain filmmakers. The White Lady, or the Woman in White, is an urban legend that is steeped in the annals of horror stories across the world. It usually follows a similar premise, even though it varies from culture to culture. But essentially, it is a woman wearing a white dress that haunts a specific area, and oftentimes she haunts it due to grief, suicide, loss, or a tragic situation. There are some examples across the world, like from Estonia. The most famous White Lady of Estonia is said to reside at Haapsalu Castle. According to legend, a canon fell in love with her, so she hid in the castle disguised as a choir boy, but she was discovered when the bishop visited Haapsalu, where he subsequently immured her into the wall that she was hiding in, which essentially means embalm into the wall, making that her eternal prison. That's freaky. To this day, she is said to look out at the baptistry's window in grief for her beloved man. According to legend, she can be seen on clear August full moon nights. But in this movie, based in New York, we are talking about the Lady in White from Rochester. Also known as the Lady in the Lake, the 19th century White Lady wanders the park area, obsessively looking for her daughter's body. The latter, who was slain by a boyfriend or a group of hoodlums, depending on the story you hear. Legend has it that the human White Lady either killed herself in grief or died alone and heartbroken, and this movie focuses just on that. Prior to filming, the director meticulously storyboarded every scene prior to the shoot, which again, like, this movie is filmed so wonderfully. You can tell by every frame, every shot, every intention that he had a vision in mind. I've been known in the past to kind of do reviews of kind of spoiling the entire movie or reviewing it through a narration of recapping it, but lately I've been wanting to kind of talk about the gist of it and more about what the movie means to me, because so many people are reviewing horror movies in the same format. I want to bring something different to my videos. I'm a filmmaker at heart, and I aspire to make my own horror movie very soon, so to see someone take a project of a story that they grew up with and kind of brought the filming to their hometown and brought the community together to make a spooky movie means a lot to me, and I'm sure it means a lot to the director. The main thing I wanted to talk about this movie that I love the most, that it sets apart other than the beautifully crafted imagery of the film, is the childhood-like wonder. This movie reminds me heavily of films like The Goonies or the show The Wonder Years. Like, the 80s just have this beautiful way of portraying nostalgia. I feel like movies try to do it now, and sometimes I'll watch movies about the 90s. Because I grew up in the 90s, I'll watch movies about the 90s from directors now, and it just doesn't seep through you like some of these 80s movies do, and it's so beautiful. The actor who plays Frank, the main character, is a kid named Lucas Haas, and for like 10 years old, he's a phenomenal actor. He sells every single role he does. The love and bond between Frank and his brother and his father and everything just feels so real and pure. His grandparents, even though they're like Italian, foreign, and they speak very little English, they have a comic relief to it that's very interesting. All the characters are really believable, from the two bullies to Willie, who was framed for being the murderer, to his family. It's just this small, sleepy town drama, and all these people flowing through being little minor characters, and it seems so real and truthful. Starting off in the 1980s, Frankie Scarlatti goes back to his hometown. Right off the gates, we see beautiful scenery, and he goes to a cemetery, and as he's staring at the grave of someone, a man walks up, and essentially he tells him a story from his childhood that changed his life for good. And the rest of the movie is a flashback to the 1960s, where Frankie is just 9 years old, living at a beautiful farmhouse with his grandparents, parents, and brother. This movie has an awesome introduction scene of them biking through the town, trying to get through school, as we see all these Halloween-esque still shots. I'm gonna say 100 times probably, but this movie just oozes October. This movie is the closest thing to a pumpkin that you could find. His brother Gino is a little bit older and likes to pick on him and nag on him, but they have a love that is unbreakable. At the beginning of the movie, as they're biking to school, Gino pulls a prank that goes a little bit too far and accidentally launches Frankie into a pile of concrete, and that part really suspended my disbelief. Out of all things, because after he falls into the concrete and gets his bike and book and pumpkin and everything wrecked, I'm like, this dude's gonna freeze up. I'm like, this dude's gonna seize up like a crosswalk. But no, he just wipes it off of him, and the bike still rides, and the pumpkin's still a little bit messed up. But I feel like they should just made him crash into mud, because the second he crashed into concrete, that kind of fucking made me mad. It's clearly around one of the nights leading up to Halloween, so all the kids are in class dressed up in costumes, having fun, doing a pumpkin contest, when the teacher calls Frankie up and lets him read one of his stories to the class, setting up the fact that he's very creative and has a wild imagination, and the other kids call him weird. He tells his story essentially about a Godzilla that takes over the city. Some of the kids are scared, the teacher's a little bit on edge, and the bullies are laughing. And when he finishes the story, the only one that pretty much appreciated it was the teacher, and then this little girl sitting next to him was fucking risen on him bad.
I wish I was as weird as you. Thanks.
She was trying to get his digits, but it was the 60s, so I don't think they had phones like that. But clearly Frankie is a weird, strange kid, loves monster movies. I mean, he's dressed up wearing a Bela Lugosi Dracula mask on the top of his head. Such an aesthetic vibe. I need to get that mask for the room. After helping the teacher, Frankie goes to leave school when he runs into the bullies, and they pretty much hatch a plan to bully him. You know how it goes, bullies. They like to ruin people's lives, so they lock him in the closet of his classroom at the school, and this is where the movie takes a turn. He's sitting up there and the sun goes down and he's scared when all of a sudden through the door he sees a creepy little girl ghost, and she comes through, and it seems to be wonderful and magical and fascinating until he sees her brutally get murdered. When I saw that scene, it pretty much dropped my jaw. If you watch this movie when you're a little bit younger, you're like, ooh, but as a grown-up, watching a little kid get strangled to death by an unknown phantom was very disturbing. And then this dude comes into the closet where Frankie is, and he's looking for something in the closet. He doesn't quite know what, but then when Frankie makes a peep, he starts to get strangled to death and kind of has an outer body experience, floating through the sleepy town until he wakes up from his dad resuscitating him back to life. Frankie is in the hospital, and it becomes a whole speculation around the town, and essentially there is a lore and legend throughout the town. I mean, maybe not a lore and legend because it's factual, of a man who goes around killing and doing ungodly things to young children. So Frankie becomes the hero, the unsung hero, the survivor, the lone survivor of this brutal massacre that's been spanning the last few years. And the dad's devastated. Everyone in town is just shaken up. And there's a scene where Frankie's in the bed and the dad says, "Do you remember what the killer looked like?" Frankie's like, "No, I couldn't see. His face was too dark," because when they showed the man, he had pretty much entrenched in black clothes. So no one knows who the killer is, but everyone in town seems to think that it is the janitor, Harold Willie Williams, and it's the 1960s. And I mean, first the janitor was at the school. He was the only person at the school other than Frankie, and then also Willie is black, so they even make some comments throughout the movie that he's the perfect suspect because he's a black man, or that he had to have been the one to do it. Very, very dated speculations from the 60s. Even when Frankie says, "I didn't see the man's face that attacked me," he didn't say the room was dark, he said he was dark. And they even showed, maybe I'm reading into it too much, but they showed the dad kind of be like, As Frankie recovers at home, his brother Gino shows him a newspaper article about the attack. He learns it is linked to 11 killings, all apparently by a serial killer targeting children. The ghostly girl he saw in the closet was Melissa Ann Montgomery, and she continues to appear to Frankie. And they kind of form a friendship throughout the movie. I'm not going to spoil too much of this movie because of how good it looks and how beautiful it's filmed. I want you to go into it for yourself. But one thing I will say about it is, for what it does in cinematography and aesthetic and trying to create a magnificent story, I will say it's nearly runs almost 2 hours and it's a little bit drawn out, and a lot of it isn't kind of quite pieced together as much as I wanted it to be. So yeah, if you want to watch a movie this year that really speaks volumes and has the Halloween aesthetic to it, and it's just a good movie to put on and enjoy a story, I highly suggest Lady in White. Alright guys, that's the video. What do you think about this movie? Have you seen it before? Do you have any connecting memories to it that makes it mean a lot to you? Do you think it looks just as good as I do? Do you think it's very nostalgic and vibey? Let me know. Comment down below. Subscribe, give me a thumber, hit that ding-a-ling button harassing you, telling you, hey, it's me, I'm here, and I'm gonna say it 1 time for the 1 time and 2 time for the O's. Give me a hell yeah for horror.